full name, huh?
That's correct.
You're from which place?
I am from Trivandrum, Dr. Shanmugam.
Okay. So what was your basic qualification, education, and interest?
Oh, that all we're going to talk. The webinar just opened. So when we just...
In the meantime, when he is free, I will ask all these things, get information.
Yeah.
Then you will give me more.
I've been a student of management and social policy, Dr. Shanmugam.
Oh, good. All through in Kerala or elsewhere?
No, non-resident Mallu.
Oh, okay. Right. So your present position is?
So I work with an organization called Sattva. I am a partner there.
Okay.
Right. We're going to start. Where's my phone? Yeah. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Prism Talks, which stands for Progress in Research, Innovation, Science, and Medicine, bought by Chennai Liver Foundation for you, where we aim to bring some high-end speakers to your office, to your computers, for you to understand all these various fields. So, of course, CLF basically does a lot of liver preventive work in the community. We partner with WHO, ICMR, and we've been doing this for quite some time now. But we thought we should kindle interest, we should create more research activities. Collaboration is the key today, these days. And in that process, a couple of weeks ago, I was in Delhi in a meeting called CSR Box. Though we are a CSR organization, though we are an NGO, we didn't know that such an organization existed, the CSR Box. I think it was the 12th edition or the 13th edition this year. And I was surprised by the amount of work that is happening in our country. And so many things are there, so many compliances are there. And the amount of, I don't want to reveal, I'm sure the speaker is going to reveal all that, but the amount of money that is being donated today in India is humongous, right? And as NGOs, as organizations, we should know how to tap these organizations, how to leverage whatever we are doing, and how to get to the next level. Right, as we speak, Arun just disappeared. There's Arun. Okay, so I've got great pleasure in introducing Arun Nathan, whom I met in Delhi 2-3 weeks ago. Since then, he's been a good friend. We've been communicating. And Arun is a partner in an organization called Sattva. Sattva is a social auditing organization. They are fairly big. They've got branches all over India. And they apart from the you're a partner in the organization, right, Arun? Right. Sorry, Arun's a partner in the organization. He's an executive coach, an expert in fundraising and strategy development. Over the last 2 decades, Arun has led funding and implementing organizations across South Asia and Africa. He was the CSR and the sustainability head of companies in banking, financial, insurance, and all retail sectors. For example, L&T, Lifestyle International, IDFC Group, and so on. He was the CEO of Jagtiani Foundation, a high network promoted philanthropic initiative. Arun's a certified coach and an NLP practitioner and specializes in coaching high-performing leaders in the impact sector. He loves teaching and facilitation, as you would shortly know. He's been a great faculty, as a guest faculty at the IRMA, IIM Bangalore, XIMB, Terry University, and the Shiv Nadar University. He's an alumnus of the London School of Economics and the IRMA. Arun, the field is yours.
Hey, thank you, Dr. Vivek. It's a pleasure being part of this conversation, and hello all. There are 2 of us here. My name is Arun, and I am joined by my colleague Riya Gupta, who leads our work on fundraising here. We've got another 50 plus minutes for this particular conversation. So just before getting into the slides, just as a very quick overview about the organization that Riya and I work with. We work with an organization called Sattva. It's an impact consulting firm. As an organization, we work with an entire spectrum of the impact stakeholders. These include nonprofits, a number of nonprofits across, some of that you can see on the screen. We work with the entire spectrum of the funding stakeholders. This includes corporates. We work with anywhere between 70 to 100 corporates a year. We work with family philanthropists. We work with international foundations, and we also work with the government in a very strategic and close manner. Given that in this entire piece of work that we are doing, funding becomes an extremely important element for nonprofits, for hospitals, and so on and so forth. We've seen that the funding ecosystem in itself has been evolving significantly, and there has been a lot of interest in this space. So what I intend to do over the next few minutes is share with you a few insights that we have kind of come across, because we work on both sides of the spectrum with nonprofits and also with the funders here. Share with you some ecosystem trends, share with you some areas where organizations have really been able to leverage the trends in the funding ecosystem. This approximately should take us about 20-25 minutes. I also keen to see if we can assist you with any of the questions that you have. So just in case, as you go through, as you hear the slides, hear the content that I'm also sharing, if you've got questions, please do put that in the chat. Post the first 20-25 minutes, we can pick them up and we can do an interactive latter half of the conversation. I hope that is okay. And if that is, then we can quickly jump into the content. Yeah, super. Okay, so let me just first set the overall context, right? If you really look at the philanthropic landscape here in India, you would find that in most of the grant-based or philanthropic ecosystem, the sources of funding are broadly divided into two. So one, you've got money that's coming out through the international routes. This is where organizations, particularly if you're a nonprofit or a hospital, etc., you would need an FCRA license and so on. The second is there is an entire space of domestic funding available, right? And the domestic funding channels can broadly be divided into three. There are companies who put in money as part of their corporate social responsibility. You have philanthropists. These are primarily families, households, individuals with wealth who currently have chosen the philanthropic route. And there is retail funding. And retail funding is small ticket size where people are able to kind of contribute up to about 5,000 rupees and so on. So this is broadly the source of funds which are available to organizations in a country like India. What is interesting is if you were to actually look at estimates of the overall funding available in India, the overall annual philanthropic capital is about 1.31 lakh crores, right? At this amount of annual inflow, the kind of quantum of money that we are talking about currently is unprecedented. There was never a time in history when India has received so much of philanthropic capital, both domestically and otherwise. What is also interesting to see is the table that you see below, right? And it's also very interesting data. There are two interesting things about the numbers that you're seeing on the screen. Number one is the fact that out of the total 1.3 plus lakhs crore, which is coming into India, over 80% of this money is domestic money. It's less than 20% of that is primarily coming from international sources. So we are talking about a domestic quantum of money being far greater than the international money which is available. Second is the CAGR that you can see there. And as you can clearly see, the rate of growth of domestic money far outstrips the rate of growth of international funds, which means that any organization which has a non-profit side to its own operations, for them to really be able to tap into domestic money is no longer a matter of if, but it is a matter of when, right? And this also shows the quantum of money which is primarily flowing into a country like India. Yeah. Now, if you were to deconstruct this particular number, you will find that one significant channel of the domestic money, which is creating this kind of buoyancy, is from corporate social responsibility, right? So it's important to kind of also see where is this buoyancy happening and what is and how is that interesting, because even when you look at this overall money of about 107,000 crores, since it's coming from three different channels, each one of these channels also operate very, very differently. Right? So it is important to understand the nature of the channel, because what works in one channel does not necessarily work in another channel. So what we will do is, over the next few slides, we will do a deep dive on the first and the most important channel, which is the CSR. There is also content and conversations around family philanthropy, and that is something that we can pick up in case there are any questions. So currently we will focus on CSR here. If you were to really look at the overall CSR funding here, it is, as you can see on the graph on the left-hand side, you will find that the amount of money that is coming from the CSR channels is growing every single year, except for a little bit of stagnation around the COVID years. On the left-hand side, you can see that it has been steadily growing. What is very interesting about this particular graph is, according to last year's estimates, the idea was the CSR, overall CSR funds was estimated to grow to about 33,000 crores. But even on a year-on-year basis, you find that this money has grown and it's also beaten estimates. So FY24, the total amount of CSR money which has been expended is 34,600 crores. That is a quantum of money that is flowing in. This money that is being spent from a CSR standpoint has been spent by over 20,000 companies. So it is again not a few companies. There are quite a few companies which are spending this money. But the last and the most interesting thing that I think is important for all of us to notice is the right-hand side and the three figures that we are talking about here. In 2014, when there was a lot of conversation around the CSR law coming into force, CSR was seen as compliance, right? Which primarily meant that there was a law, which primarily meant that as part of the law, companies meeting certain thresholds had to spend money on CSR. So it was broadly seen as a lot of compliance. But what we see now on the right-hand side is very, very interesting. You will find that over 57% companies which are spending, which have the mandate of spending CSR money are currently spending more than the mandate, right? Which in itself is very interesting, right? So if you know companies and companies who focus on efficiency and so on, you necessarily don't want to spend more money than what is kind of mandated by compliance. But over half of the companies are spending much more than mandated amount. That's one. What is interesting to see is, out of this, the companies which are spending beyond the mandated amount, over 18% of the companies are spending money which is more than 25% of their mandated obligation of the CSR fund, right? In fact, what's most interesting to see is about 400 companies, about 380 of them are spending CSR money where there is no mandate for them to spend the money, right? Now, this is a very, very interesting phenomena that we see in the ecosystem. And it is important to understand this phenomena for us to really be able to leverage this particular channel of funding for our nonprofits. And I'm assuming that as among us, we've got a number of us who are either running charitable hospitals or are engaged with nonprofit entities. And that is primarily the space where a lot of CSR money is currently going to. So it is important to also understand why are companies spending significant amount of money over and beyond compliance, right? And that is where we have discovered that what turned out to be a compliance-only issue some 10 years ago currently has moved to a point where companies are no longer looking at this particular funding as just compliance. But companies are also understanding this from a standpoint of shared value, which primarily means that today when companies spend the money, they not only look for compliance-related value, right? But they look for other value from the same amount, and that could be various different ways in which companies derive value from the spending of the money. Let me give you an example. For example, if there is a company which is looking for specific talent that needs to be developed, and that particular talent is not easily available in the market, and that talent is important for the business to grow, the organization can actually get into CSR activities by being able to do employment generation related projects by being able to do that and by being able to do skilling organizations and skilling work, they're one able to create social impact, but at the same time, they're also able to get a workforce that they can tap into. That's one example of shared value. Similarly, organizations continuously, and particularly funders, corporate funders, are looking for opportunities where they are able to, on one hand, create social impact, and on the other hand, they are also able to generate value for the money that they are spending. This is an extremely important nuance to keep in mind, particularly when you are thinking about leveraging the entire funding around CSR, right? I think we should also go a step deeper to kind of understand what is the context in which this money is usually kind of spent. And we can go to the next slide, Arya. Usually, when you look at the CSR money, which is spent in the context of compliance, on one hand, CSR is no longer just the 2% of the money that the companies are spending, but it is also a space which is highly regulated. So on one hand, there is a very, very strong lens of compliance. And so companies definitely want to ensure that compliance is met. But that is not the only reason why companies nowadays spend CSR money. There are a lot of internal expectations that companies have. So for example, in many companies, the CSR money is also used to develop new markets. CSR is also used as a key catalyst to penetrate into existing markets. CSR is also seen as an opportunity for companies to definitely enhance branding. In many cases, there is an employment engagement angle. Or as you kind of look at each one of these value systems, within the company itself, there are different departments, functions who've got expectations on this money. It is important for any organization which is also trying to get, let's say, for example, leverage this money or get a grant from this particular corporates to understand that it is in the spectrum that it is working. The reason why this also becomes important is many times we go to companies for CSR funds, and there we are also able to speak to the companies and talk about the work that we are doing, right? Which presents only one part of the story. And in our view, that is usually a half pitch that you're making. I think to be able to make a full pitch, it becomes extremely important to understand where the company is really kind of coming in from, right? So I think there is this entire piece of being able to understand that there are multiple stakeholders and there are multiple stakes as this particular money is getting spent. What is also important to understand is if you look at the Indian corporate world, there is a lot of focus on sustainability, which has happened over the last 5 to 7 years, which means that companies are now, even by regulation, many companies have to align with this new framework called the Environmental, Social, and Governance Framework there. CSR is also now aligned to that, which primarily means the organizations which seek grants from companies, it is important for the organizations to also bring in this lens. And that also helps storytelling improve significantly. Lastly, CSR money, if you were to really look at the money that's kind of coming in, it's not that it can fit in all kinds of activity. Like, for example, we've seen that CSR acts as a really good scale-up capital. Many times, you know that there is something that is working in your context. Let us say, for example, you're working on a health-related issue. And in the health-related issue, you are saying about enhancing service delivery, either through hospitals or through community outreach and so on and so forth, where models are already proved. CSR acts as a significant amount of scale-up capital for these operations to happen. And in fact, if you were to really look at the kind of money that is flowing into the thematic areas, health is the second largest funded thematic area after education. So there is immense amount of money which is coming into the health space. But it is important to understand the funder much more deeply before we really get into the funding and the funding pitch that we are talking about. I've got three more slides, and then I'll stop to take questions. Can we go on to the next slide? This primarily means that while you have about 20,000 companies out there, not every company is necessarily aligned with what you want to do. So it is important that for you to kind of also understand that while there are 20,000 companies, but you need to be able to really look at those companies where the shared value is actually high. If you go in with a company and seek for grants with a company where the shared value is not very high, the chances of being able to convert and get a grant out of this is very limited. And all of us work with teams with very limited time, money, and effort. So being able to do this is very important. Today, there are multiple tools available, including the work that we do in Sattva called, and we have a platform called Fund Assist that helps you identify out of these 20,000 companies, what are the 30 companies, what are the 50 companies that align with your thematic area of work that you're doing, and also align with the areas of geography that you're working on, and fund similar activities. The moment you are able to do this, there is significant amount of targeting that you are also able to bring into the organization. As Sattva as an organization has on an annual basis, we work with hundreds of non-profits, and in many ways we also work on the behalf of funders. And we've seen that there are a few critical levers that help organizations really succeed in this particular space of fundraising and raise fundraising, particularly from the corporate space. The first and the fundamental most important thing is, I think it is important for organizations to understand the company's business. If you are in the space of health, you will find that pharma companies and the pharma industry has a lot of alignment with you compared to probably a BFSI related company. And that is because it's the nature of the business. If you are in the pharma space, health becomes an important priority. If you really look at the BFSI, and BFSI is primarily banking and the financial sector, if you really look at the banking and the financial sector, you will find that they are focusing a lot more on education. They would be focusing a lot on livelihoods and so on and so forth. So the shared value construct is different for different industries. If you were to look at oil and gas companies, you will find that oil and gas companies will be interested in health, but they will be interested in health in and around their operating areas. Like, for example, they will have their mines, they have their factories, and so on and so forth. And so there is a geographic angle also to the money that they are spending. So again, as you can clearly see, not all companies have the same priorities. And it is important for us to be able to identify the right companies where our priorities match with them. That is where really understanding the company's thematic area and geographic area becomes important. So, for example, if you are a non-profit organization working in health in the state of Tamil Nadu, in the city of Chennai, then you should be able to look for companies which are interested in the area of health and interested in the geographic area of Tamil Nadu, and particularly in Chennai, for this to happen. Generally, identifying organizations interested in health does not work for you. Generally, understanding organizations interested in Tamil Nadu in itself is also not enough. So being able to ensure that you're wearing the right lens becomes an extremely important piece. This allows you to really move from the 20,000 to that 30 companies or the 50 companies. That will essentially help. The third element which is critical is the idea of shared value that we primarily said. Before even getting and approaching a company, let us say, for example, you are able to identify a company which has got an interest in Tamil Nadu and is also has an interest in the area of health. Even before approaching them, I think it is super critical for us to think, what is the shared value for the company? Why is the company even doing these activities? It would have invested that money in education. It could have invested that money in art and culture. It is investing that money in health. So what is it gaining from it? If we have that understanding, for us to really be able to reach out to a corporate and talk not only about the project, but how is the project also helping the company, is a very, very powerful way of curating a pitch. And if we are able to do this level of understanding and of the funder, being able to have a really, really strong pitch becomes a lot more easier. We've always seen that identifying the organization or the company and identifying the shared value are the first and the most important steps. But one of the most important realities of our sector has been that people give money to people they know, which means that this is important. But in addition to that, you also need to be familiar and you also need to be able to have a relationship with the funder who is going to fund you. And this is equally important as discovering the shared value. Right? And this can happen through various means, right? This is where your networks become extremely important. Are you a well-networked organization? Is your leadership well-networked? Do you have a board that has got connects, which is also able to help you open up some of these connects, become extremely important and crucial elements, right? And lastly, once you're also able to build the relationship and you're also going and meeting the organization, it is important to bring in the storytelling element. And in the health, I think storytelling is a great asset and a leverage that a lot of organizations have. But it is also important to show evidence. If we are able to bring in these lenses, we have seen organizations being able to access a lot more funding than any other regular organization. We have realized that these are important practices to get into funding, but it is also important for us to take a step back internally and see what kind of readiness do we have as an organization, right? There are four important elements that we have seen emerging for successful organizations. Number one is the story that you are telling and the clarity that you have is an extremely important criteria for you to be able to do strategic fundraising. We have seen many organizations doing a whole range of things, due to which it becomes difficult for the organization to really talk to a corporate and say, hey, this is the problem that we are trying to solve. So here, if you have a focus, I think it is important to articulate the focus. If you don't have a focus and then there are a set of activities that you're doing, probably it might be a good idea for you to take a step back and build that strategic clarity, because that is a very critical anchor for strong storytelling. That's number one. Number two is since corporates and CSR is also heavily regulated, once, even if you are able to convert and you are able to build a partnership, a lot of corporates expect organizations which are receiving funding to provide them with progress data that happens on a very ongoing basis. It is very common for organizations and companies to ask you for monthly data on the set of activities that you're doing, which means that it is important for you to have organization readiness from that standpoint. You should have a monitoring team or a data team which is able to meet the requirements of the organization. Otherwise, what typically happens is you are able to get into a relationship, you're not able to meet the expectations of the funder, then being able to take forward the relationship in itself becomes a little difficult. The third element is, in many cases, ensuring that you have the right systems, processes, you have the right team to be able to work, speak to funders become extremely important. Because in the absence of that, the funders don't have a great experience of you. And given that, again, this is also deeply related to their own shared value and compliance, they want to be able to fund organizations where there is strong element of comfort, and that they'll get when they know that your organization is really ready to receive funds and also service it. Lastly, we have seen that well-governed organizations get a lot more funding than organizations which are not. And one very good indicator of how you have a well-governed organization is, one, whether you've got the right people, credible people on the board, and second, whether your governance practices in itself are kind of established and they are running well. We also see that all the four elements that I'm just speaking to you about are not elements that exist in silos. A lot of this are also very interdependent. So it is important for us to understand that today, from a readiness standpoint, where are we? Do we already have clarity? In which case, we don't have to work on clarity. Do we already have systems by way of which we can generate reports? In which case, I think it's a fantastic opportunity. Otherwise, we need to be able to build. So we've seen that different organizations have different strengths and different areas to step up. It is important to discover that so that you are also able to build it. And it is also important to see this in this holistic manner. Otherwise, just being able to get the shared value in itself is not enough. Just being able to identify the funders is not enough. Just being able to set up the governance is not enough. All of this need to primarily work together. I have a last 4 points, which is almost a summary of what I have spoken till now. And after that, I will pause. So just as a quick recap today, if you really look at the philanthropic ecosystem, I am repeating myself, the amount of philanthropic capital available today in a country like India is unprecedented. There is significant amount of money available. Second, even when you look at domestic channels, and we talked about 3 important channels, which is CSR, family philanthropy, and retail. While there is money in each one of these channels, the way the money behaves and way the funders behave are very different. So it is important for each one of us to also look at differentiated strategy for each one of them. Today, in our ecosystem, we've got significant amount of data that will allow us to build these channel specific strategies. So it is a great opportunity to leverage that data to build strong strategies. Fundraising is always best viewed as an investment rather than an expenditure, because in some cases, now we are currently talking about CSR, but when you look at family philanthropy, you will find that the gestation periods are much higher, right? You might actually have to work for almost 6 months or a year on one account, and then you will crack it, right? But if you view that from a 2020 format, you might find that you will get frustrated and tired very quickly. But if you view it in the cricket analogy as a test match, and you consider that as an investment, ability to then derive value from that becomes significant. And lastly, in many cases, funding is an outcome. And funding is an outcome of strong organization readiness in place. So it is important to also view the capability that an organization has in its entirety for us to really be able to succeed. This is all that I had. I'll pause here to see if you have any questions. And please do drop your questions on the chat, and then we can also pick it up.
Thanks, Arun. If I can just kickstart the whole thing. So before, can I ask you what you do as the organization? For example, if I invite you into Chennai River Foundation, what are the things that you can offer?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question, Dr. Vivek. See, as Sattva, we work as growth partners for nonprofits. Like, for example, in your case, we would primarily organization invites us primarily when typically when they are aspirational, when they want to grow and they want to create large scale impact. That is when organizations typically partner with us. As part of that particular partnership, we work as a growth partner with them. So what it primarily means is, today we are talking about this particular conversation around funding and fundraising. In the growth partnership, the lens that we wear is we help organizations figure out how to grow, and we also help them manage the growth. In the figuring out how to grow, there are three elements that we look at. Fundraising is one of them, but in addition to fundraising, we also help organizations get to this strategic clarity. We call that the organization strategy. Help them also design their programs in case they are planning to design programs. So we work with organizations to develop strategic clarity, to develop programs, and in line with both of this, help them estimate the kind of money that they need and help them build a fundraising strategy so that they are able to get to wherever they want to get to. This is the piece of helping the organizations figure out how to grow. We also realize that strategy is a great statement of intent, but the rubber hits the road in implementation. So what we also do is we work with the organization to ensure that you've got the right structure and the right roles to be able to execute good fundraising. You've got the right governance systems in place. You've got the right pitch decks. You've got the right collaterals. You go to the right organizations to be able to raise the money. We also work on capability building and help the organization build their capability, and including coaching, leadership, and so on and so forth. For some organizations, being able to move into either fundraising or strategic clarity also means significant amount of change. So we help organizations also go through change management. So in summary, what we primarily do is, depending on the need of the organization, we help the organization either with the strategy or enablement, or strategy and enablement. And that is the reason why this term being a growth partner becomes important.
And what is the minimum period that is required for engagement?
So this in fact varies, Dr. Vivek. Like, for example, a lot of our work starts from, let's say, for example, hour-long engagements like this. A lot of this we usually do pro bono. But depending on the requirement of the organization, in some cases, organizations have very strong teams. They want a perspective around what are the best practices. In such cases, we work with them and we do almost like a 2-day workshop, help organizations understand what is fundraising and so on. In some cases, organizations turn around to us and say, hey, it is not just best practices that I need to know. I need an accelerator from your side. I need you to take the best practices that you are seeing in the ecosystem. I want you to work with me and convert this into actionable plan. So let me give you an example. In some cases, organizations come to us and say, help us identify funders. right? What should I do to identify funders? In which case, best practices are enough. In some cases, organizations turn around to us and say, "Hey, I don't have the capability of doing it. Can you work with me and bring in this knowledge and help me identify the organizations so that my job from there is to really be able to say, these are the 30 companies that I have to go to. I don't have to do all the legwork of identifying organizations." Similarly, some organizations come to us and say, tell us how to write good proposals. In some cases, organizations come to us and say, can you review our pitch deck and proposals and give us recommendations so that we are able to also deliver this. So this is broadly the work that we do. Our work actually, depending on the need of the organization, varies from a 2-day workshop, which is primarily including preparation is about 2 weeks, to a full year, where organizations need an enablement support. And so the point of organizations being at different parts in their own journey becomes extremely important. So we do it very customized for the organization and set up the organization for success.
Super. Thank you. So I'm going to go through a few questions. Anil Kumar has asked, how do we set a process to identify and build a funder pipeline?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Arun. I think for this process, it is important to understand what are the different stages to actually build the pipeline, right? Even before building the pipeline, it is important to figure out who is your right funder. That is the first part of the story, so that you are able to bring that funder into a funder pipeline. Otherwise, you will have a long pipeline, but the quality of the pipeline will be very, very limited. So it is important for you to, one, identify the work that you're doing, but in addition to that, ensure that you're looking for funders who have thematic alignment, which primarily is they are interested in the thematic area of work that you're doing, to geographic alignment. In fact, I was sharing with you earlier that we currently use a platform internally called FundAssist. Now we are also making this available to a lot of other clients. Through that, I am actually able to identify let's say health thematic area wise, geography wise. So I can look at that, I can look at health, I can look at Tamil Nadu, I can look at Chennai, I can look at the companies investing in Chennai. In Chennai, I can also know which are the organizations they are giving money to and how much money are they giving and for what projects am I giving the money, right? This much amount of information is currently available in the ecosystem. Based on this information, I can develop my funder pipeline. So putting in the right criteria to identify the right funders, building this pipeline using this 30 to 50 organizations become important. We also realize that in the funder pipeline, there are two pieces. One is your existing funders and two, your new funders. And both of them need to also be treated differently. And this is exactly how you build it. And then you start converting your pipeline. And there are a lot of best practices around that.
So I think Anil's got another question. Has any outreach channel proved better than the other to reach the funder? And does it matter who is fundraising? For example, is it done by organization, someone else, or if it's someone else doing for the organization?
Yeah, I think this is a great question again. I think the suitability of the funding channel. I'm assuming here the outreach. And Anil, and please do correct me if I'm wrong. Here, I'm assuming that how do you reach out to the funder is the question. Is that the outreach channel that you're kind of mentioning to? Is that something that you can clarify? Then I can make my response useful to you.
Yeah, correct.
Okay. Got it. So actually, much more than the different channels, again, going back to this particular question of, or the basic principle of saying people give money to people they know, right? Which means that, do you know? So let us say, for example, Ria on this particular call is a funder. The question is, how do I establish a relationship with Ria so that I am not seen as a cold call in this conversation becomes important. And there are several ways to do it. Like, for example, you will find that either you have a direct contact or you have a board member who's got a direct contact. You will find that in certain cases, Ria and you are part of the same alum network. So there are different networks that you can really leverage. But it goes back to the fundamental question that even before you ask for money, you establish the relationship, right? And the quality of the outreach channel depends on what are you leveraging. The closer it is. Let us say, for example, I've got a board member who knows a funder, then that's a very, very strong connect, right? So the quality depends on the proximity and the influence that you have on the funder. We've had several cases where you've had someone knowing the board member of the company, in which case that's a very, very strong contact. In some cases, you find that you've met someone at a conference and you've exchanged cards. That may not be the easiest way for people to remember you, because in a conference, there would be like 100 cards that you would have established. That is the reason why going back and looking at a channel that allows you personalized connect becomes an extremely important piece. Who is fundraising matters significantly. Let me give you an example. If it is going to be family philanthropy, which primarily is that you're going to raise money from ultra HNIs and so on and so forth, we have seen that it is best done either by the founder or the CEO or a member of the board, right? And there are no questions about it, because that is the investment that it takes. Several times what also happens is opening the door someone senior can do, but as the account is growing, you can then hand it over to professionals. But it is super critical to kind of identify and recognize the fact that the person who is fundraising is very material to the success of the fundraising relationship.
The next is from Padmavati, who's asking, CSR funding for mental health interventions is a huge challenge. Your thoughts, please.
I think that I can completely relate to the point that mental health interventions and CSR funding, you will not find that is the biggest area of funding, right? And it is important to also take a step back and see why is that not the biggest area. That's also primarily because, again, going back to how the CSR operates. Since CSR is also a very regulated area, you will find that companies look for tangible change that they can demonstrate as having created impact, right? This becomes very, very important for companies. That is the reason why you find a lot of companies really looking at tangible outcomes. That's number one. However, I have in the past seen that the mental health interventions in many ways are also gaining a lot more of traction. What we used to hear about mental health intervention 3 years ago is not what we are hearing. I can see that there is a lot more traction to this. A final point is, see, several times a mental health intervention can be submitted as a proposal for mental health intervention. In some cases, it need not be called mental health intervention. So let us say, for example, I am working with children in school and working with children in school on mental health. It can still be part of the larger narrative of, and see, if the mental health intervention in a school is done well, one of the areas that will definitely impact is the educational outcomes. So the same work that you are able to do can also be packaged in different ways. It need not necessarily be called mental health intervention. So again, depending on the funder, if the funder has a priority on mental health, it is a great idea to take it as a mental health intervention. If a funder is focusing on education, I can still do mental health intervention because it supports educational outcomes, and also call it educational outcomes and still do the mental health work. So there is enough and more opportunity for us to speak the language and still be true to the purpose of the work that we are doing. But I completely agree that it's an emergent area. This is not one of these areas where there is a significant amount of money coming in. By the way, you should also definitely explore the family philanthropy space. That is a space where things which are more long term, you will find funding also coming through. And if you get one good advocate as a philanthropist who is interested in mental health, you will find that ability to attract more funding becomes a lot more easier.
So one of the problem which we face is when we want to preventive work.
Correct.
When I say I want to prevent certain aspects in liver disease, right? Now, as you say, the outcome can't be seen for many years, right? I can say I've screened so many patients with liver disease, I've vaccinated so many patients, which will prevent liver cancer and various other liver diseases. But the outcome is not seen, right? So I think that is also a challenge when we present proposals. They say, yeah, I mean, it's not in our portfolio. And what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think that's an important piece, because there are two elements that you're bringing together. One element is the reality of the fact that the gestation period of a problem showing up is high.
Yeah.
And you're juxtaposing this against the regulatory environment that a CSR operates in. Because a CSR is expected to show progress on an annual basis. And so you will always find the CSR head asking, hey, how do I show progress internally, right? In many cases, we have found that organizations continue to focus on the number of screenings, the number of, in many cases, number of surgeries that are done and so on and so forth as indicators. But when you also see long term, and if you find that organizations are not funding, bringing in a blend of CSR and philanthropy becomes extremely important. Like, for example, it's not that CSR is able to fund all kinds of causes. If you look at the money that is also getting spent, you will find that it's got specific geographic focus, and within health also there are specific thematic area focus. We have seen that in some cases, organizations, and that's where identifying the right funder also becomes important. We have found that in some cases, organizations are very, very strategic, right? To be able to say, hey, this is the problem that we are trying to solve. So let me give you an example. This is not directly liver, but I used to work with a philanthropic organization, which used to be deeply attached to the issue of diabetes prevention, and that being closely linked with lifestyle and so on and so forth. Again, that was also because there was a personal relationship, but there was a philanthropic interest also. So my submission would be to really, one, look at those funders who've got a strategic interest and who understand that in a case like this, the gestation period is long, and there are funders like this, and also blend with private philanthropy, which is the family philanthropy, along with CSR. I think that's a really good way of building this forward.
Another question which says the pharma companies are often restricted by the policies of the National Medical Council.
So I would like to understand that more, because in many cases, while the company is restricted, not so much the CSR, and the CSR part, which is more on service and service delivery, is restricted. That is what we've kind of seen with a lot of companies. But would love to kind of engage offline to kind of see what kind of policies place restriction, and if so,
I think if I may interfere, I think there's a slight difference between companies giving it to NGOs than companies giving it to individual doctors. I think the NMC very clearly says individual doctors cannot take money from private companies, right? But again, my problem with large companies, for example, Sun Foundation, Cipla Foundation, all the pharma foundations, is that they have their own foundation itself to do the work, right? Because you alluded to the fact that pharmaceutical companies are good companies for medical NGOs to take money from, right? But I've seen the fact that they say, oh, we've got our own foundation. For example, Cipla Foundation focuses a lot on palliative care. Right? Earlier, they were into pulmonology and lung. Now they're into palliative care. So we find it very difficult to crack the pharma companies. That's my thought.
Yeah, it's a very interesting point that you've actually raised, because in fact, one of the very interesting things that we are seeing is we are finding that implementing organizations, right, have actually over a period of time not been able to absorb the private philanthropy capital which is available, which has also over a period of time led to the rise of new actors like the corporate foundations that you're talking about. Today, there are large corporate foundations. Typically, when I run my organization, I don't see a corporate foundation as a peer. But today you have funders who consider corporate foundations, hospitals, universities as my peers. And that is a reality that is there. However, we are also finding that if you look at the large sector here, you find that there are about 20,000 companies. Not everyone has their foundation, right? Some of the big ones do have, and that is what you find across the sector. Some of the large organizations do have their foundations, but from our experience, we continue to feel that there is significant amount of scope in each one of these thematic areas. We work with about 100 companies, and we don't work with corporate foundations. Right? There are a few corporate foundations that we work with, but the rest of them are directly working with companies with large budgets. There was at one particular point in time a significant benefit of having own foundation, which over a period of time has also diminished. So today, unless I want to either directly implement or I want to fundraise from other companies, like for example, a Tata Steel Foundation, who would do direct implementation, but in addition to that, would also fundraise from other organizations. Unless that kind of a focus is there, for the company, they usually don't now get into setting up a foundation and so on and so forth.
So Anil's got another question. How proven has it been for organizations to outsource their funding? Is it better to nurture an in-house FR team, fundraising team?
It is always a best practice to have an internal team for fundraising. No one can tell your story better than you, right? And the moment you outsource fundraising, the content is outsourced, the soul is not, right? The way, let us say, for example, on this, the way a Dr. Vivek would talk about a story around Chennai Liver Foundation, no organization can do it. And a lot of funders, particularly the strategic ones, look for commitment from leadership, right? They are not looking for middlemen in this conversation. And I think that is the best way to grow it. So if you want to grow your organization in a stable, predictable manner, it is a great investment to have, right? You might get other organizations to get you started and so on and so forth. Like, for example, one of the things that we do is when we work with organizations, we find that the organization has aspiration, but to build the team, it takes about 6 months. We say, hey, let us step in and help you and set up the particular team. But at the end of the day, having your own fundraising muscle in the context of a country like India is highly recommended.
So we have one question from Mr. Sridhar. I wish I could make him talk, but Sridhar is from Mission Samriddhi. Have you heard of it?
Yeah.
So the Polaris Foundation. So he's asked the question, how has social stock exchange evolved so far as a robust fundraising option?
So it's a great question, Sridhar. Social stock exchange has been a great idea, but I think the impact of that has been emergent. And I'll tell you why that is the case, right? Today, if you really were to look at social stock exchange as a platform for fundraising, first of all, it does not allow CSR money to come in. Right? So if you have the 34,000 crores that we talk about, not a penny of that can kind of come in by regulation. So ek to wahan pe paisa nahi hai. That's number one. The second element is today in social stock exchange, I can register myself, right? And I can list myself. But I, as a non-profit, have to make the efforts of really bring this money also together. So the social stock exchange is not currently helping me fundraise, but I have to organize for the funding. And then I have to work with the stock exchange to list myself and get this done. The larger imagination of the social stock exchange is really be able to help organizations do that. But in the current state of affairs, the onus is on the organization to do that. So there are different advantages being registered with the social stock exchange and so on and so forth. But it has not proven at this particular point to be a robust fundraising option. Our larger imagination is in the next few years, it will come up as an important source. But at this particular point in time, a lot rides on the non-profit.
And then most of the organizations are looking at NGOs who have experience and turnover of over 1 crore. How can new organization establish or prove their projects?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question, Sridharan. Again, when you look at the corporates, it's not that all corporates are the same size. Right? You will find that there are some corporates which are much smaller and some corporates which are much larger. So if you were to, let us say, for example, go to a corporate which has got a 50 to 100 crore budget, for them, an organization which is below 1 crore may not be material enough for a relationship to be able to build. But if you're going to a company which has got an overall budget of 5 crores, they can't for them a non-profit with 20 crores or 5 crores is too big. They want to be able to give much smaller grants. So I think again it goes back to the point of being able to identify the right funders out of this 20,000 companies, and there is significant amount of alignment that you can build there. So in summary, if you are able to identify the right organizations, even below 1 crore, you will be able to start mobilizing. But it is absolutely true that as you are able to grow, companies also have this internal benchmark in their own mind where they wouldn't fund more than a certain percentage of your overall turnover. Roughly about 15-20% ke upar they usually don't fund. So if you are an organization of about 1 crore, then the ticket size is important. You should be able to look at organizations that give about 10 to 20 lakhs and then be able to identify that. It is a very, very clearly identification issue that can be solved.
The one question is about the social organization, for example, Rotary.
Yeah.
So how does Rotary fundraise? Because one is because the leadership changes every year.
Yeah.
And so the paths and the ideas, the principles change every year. So how will Rotary, of course, Rotary is known for their philanthropic activity. So you think it's easy for Rotaries to pick up money from organizations? Because as you said, Rotary does not have the big ticket. You know, for example, Wokart Foundation will say, oh, if you've not done 50 lakhs a year, then we're not going to do this for you. Right? So how would Rotary fundraise?
So there are different ways in which networks like Rotary, Lions kind of bring in funding. In fact, just to kind of also add on, I think it is important to also note that there is a network called SVP. It's called Social Venture Partners. Again, it is a network of HNIs who've kind of come together. All of these networks have individuals who are professionally or entrepreneurially successful, who also want to be able to create social impact. But the ticket sizes they bring in is not as high as a philanthropist would primarily bring in. In most of these cases, they either bring in their own personal money into the projects that they are doing. There was a point in time that I used to be part of the Rotary movement. And so this funding primarily comes in from own support, own donations, and so on. Rotary, by the way, has also established foundations. So it has got its own foundations. Now, the moment there is a foundation in place, it becomes a separate legal entity and its ability to raise funds then become higher. Then if I have a foundation, then I'll also leverage the Rotary network and get CSR funds and then build my own work. These are the two ways in which we have seen networks of philanthropists and HNIs really work. There is own contribution, and if there are legal entities, then they start raising.
There is one question regarding patent and related research for medical device innovation, CSR funding. Would it be possible?
Sorry, can you please repeat the question? I'm also trying to...
For patent and related research for medical device.
So today, in fact, it's a great question, because today there is an emergent, but there is material amount of money that is going from the CSR kitty into research and innovation. And a lot of that is primarily going into research and incubation. And you will find that today some of the top universities are kind of getting this particular money and investing. So in fact, we primarily know many incubators where there is work that is happening on research, and based on that, patents are also getting filed for. So that is a very, very emergent piece. The interesting thing about being able to, but there are also regulations around it, which primarily means that you need to be registered with the Department of Science and Technology and so on and so forth. But the interesting thing is, if you are able to contribute to one of these entities, usually the larger story is you have to spend the money. Here, being able to contribute to that particular incubator or that institution has taken as expenditure of money. So a lot of organizations are interested. And when I say organizations, companies are also interested in research and innovation. By the way, we also find that there is a lot of interest in research and innovation in the family philanthropy space also. Because here you are talking about individuals who also understand business. And we are seeing now new networks coming up focusing on research, and particularly the primary research that's coming through.
One question which I have is maybe just one or two more, we're going to close down. Is the for small NGOs, right? What I've seen, even we've made that mistake of not having a utilization certificate, not keeping the records properly. And then end of the year, when the funder asks us some paperwork, and we have nothing to hand over, right? So what are the primary roles that, or the things that the NGOs should have, however small the NGOs?
Correct. I think that's a great question, Dr. Vivek, and that is where the organizational readiness element that I was talking to you about becomes very, very important. Today, even by regulation, there are a set of things that any grantee is supposed to do. And basically, it comes down to elements relating to the organization's finances, the organization's impact, and so on. And any organization that you also reach out to, or any funder who is funding you, it is a great practice to ask them, what is the requirement that you have? You will usually find that there are a set of compliance requirements around finances, which primarily means there should be evidence to ensure that the money has been received and the money has been spent. The money has been spent in line with what has been promised as part of the grant agreement. And all the supporting documents relating to that needs to be there. Because it's not only the CSR who is now involved, even the company's internal audit in many cases are also kind of involved in elements like this. So financial prudence becomes an extremely important piece. The second important piece is with respect to impact. So let us say, for example, you are talking about the number of screenings that have been done, or there are surgeries that have been done, or there are the number of camps that you are doing, right? Or there is a medical equipment that has been bought through CSR money, the usage of that. It is important to maintain these records and also maintain capability so that you can relay this good quality, non-contaminated data to the CSR. This become two very, very important things. When you get in touch with any CSR, they themselves will also give you a set of things to do. And it's always a great idea to also speak to a chartered accountant if a chartered accountant is helping to you. We also have a set of details and we are very happy to share that with you. It is also on our network called the India Partner Network. So this information is also available. Very happy to share that with you.
And the last question, say if a funder gives you an X amount of money, is it mandated that we spend that money in that year, financial year?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Current laws, right, mandate that if a company gives you money, that money be spent or utilized. That is the important piece. This not only applies when a company gives that money, let's say a CIPLA gives the money to an NGO, this even applies when a CIPLA gives the money to CIPLA Foundation, right? Even if it is 1 rupee which is unspent, according to the current law, this money has to be given back to the company. Now, the company can create an account and take that money and disperse it a second time. Law allows for it. But at the end of the financial year, that money necessarily needs to be spent. This is also an important element because usually in many companies, unspent money is also seen as not being very efficient. So when CSR teams look for partners, they also look for organizations capable of spending money. That is also the reason why you need to have the right systems so that if you take, let's say, for example, 50 lakhs, and if you're not able to spend 40 lakhs, it is a compliance issue for the company and it also impacts the relationship.
Super. That was one of the best sessions we've ever had, Arun. I was initially a bit skeptical because you said I'll talk for 15 minutes and then we'll see how it goes. I said, no, it's a 1 hour session. But then I think there was so many questions. I apologize to a lot of people because many questions we've missed. I think Ria was kind enough to put the email address there. I think they should get in touch with you. Arun, thank you very much. That was such an enlightening session. There's more to talk, but I'm sure we know a lot of people are going to get in touch with you. I'm going to get in touch with you. So thank you once again for being part of Prism Talks.
Absolutely. It's been an absolute delight and pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for giving us an opportunity to come and interact with all of you and for the time that you spared for this event.
Lovely.
Thanks, Dr. Vivek, especially for you.
Thanks, Ria.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. So for completion's sake, there is a link for forms in the chat box. So I request you to fill it up. It's a feedback form. Once you do that, then we would send you an e-certificate. And in about a few days' time, the recording of this would be available on YouTube for you to see. And of course, Ria and Arun's email is on. So please feel free to get in touch with them. Thank you once again and have a very good evening. Bye-bye.